penalties and not taking advantage of the short field, the things that stick out, immediately. Our defense did a great job of giving us a chance to win the game, and we didn't come through in that second half. So that's on us, and we got to get it fixed and have two strong halves, in order to beat a team like that.
Hello and welcome to the Extra Point, brought to you by Microsoft Surface. I'm Shelby Cassesse in for Missy Matthews. Another round of AFC North ball in Pittsburgh Sunday evening. The Bengals walk away with this one 37-30, and the Steelers fall to 3-7. Let's break it all down with our panelists. Joining us today, all from Steelers.com and Steelers Nation Radio, Dale Lolley. We also have Arthur Moats joining us, and Merril Hoge joining us as well. Guys, I want to hear from all of you to start this one, because the Steelers were even on time of possession with the Bengals, and they also won the turnover battle. But Dale, what went wrong for you there in the second half?
Just too many big plays. And when you talk about big plays, if you look at it, the Bengals, Joe Burrow threw 3 passes at or behind the line of scrimmage on Sunday. All 3 of them went for touchdowns. Too much run after the catch. We saw a missed tackle along the sidelines that was turned into a big 30-plus yard gain on the 90-plus yard touchdown drive in the second half. You can't lose that yards per play battle by more than a yard, which is what happened to the Steelers in this game. That used to be a Kevin Colbert thing, that he would always look at which team won the yards per play battle. And a lot of times, unless the turnover margin is just ridiculously lopsided, the team that wins the yards per play battle wins the game.
Yeah, and I also thought offensively for the Steelers, in that third quarter, the third down possessions just weren't good enough. Obviously going 0 for 4 on those, and it was a mixed bag. There wasn't enough consistency. When you're talking about some of the calls, it wasn't schemed up the best. You talk about some of the execution, whether it was from Kenny Pickett or from the receivers, it wasn't consistent enough. And then you had the protection, and that eventually started to go, in the opposite direction as well. So I think it was multiple elements that played a role in why it looked the way that it did. But that was, one of the things that I thought for the offense in terms of why they struggled. It was more so in those third down possessions.
Merril, for you.
Shelby, I actually thought it all went south right after T.J. Watt's big pick. If you really look at the game and study from that perspective on, it's a one-score game. You got the ball around the 21-yard line, and you get 3 points. Then if you go to the fourth quarter, you have the ball right after Pickens' big explosive play. You got the ball at the 50-yard line. You end up having the ball at the 50-yard line 2 different times, and you get no points. So, offense, and then so they don't get any points. Why didn't they get points? I mean, there was penalties. Pickett didn't play well, threw the ball poorly on a couple of those sequences. Their offense had, aside from one particular run, that was about the only offense they had. So they didn't do anything to take advantage of the field of position where they stood. So in all those 3 possessions, roughly 4, quite honestly, you get 3 points out of that. And then explosive plays are dangerous in the National Football League. You're trying to always create them, and you try not to give them up. And they really had 2 explosive plays back to back, and that was when they got backed up. When you got backed up like that, in 2 plays, they're at the Steelers' 39-yard line. So they flipped the field immediately. They had a couple. They ended up scoring on that drive, obviously, and they kept scoring from plays that were the same. They were releasing the back out of the backfield, and they did a good job by design to create picks. One time you're in a position to make a tackle and you fail to make the tackle. You make the tackle on the 10-yard line, it's a lot different than the tackle being broken, you score a touchdown. So there's a lot of self-inflicted wounds, quite honestly. I mean, that's the one positive you can say about it. They can be corrected. They need to be corrected. Schematically, they did a few things correctly, but your inefficiency offensively, once you got that turnover, to only have 3 points is just devastating. You can't get the ball in that position in the NFL and not come away with just 3 points. You're just not it's gonna be hard to win, especially when the turnover battle. You win the turnover battle, oftentimes you're gonna win games, And unfortunately, I just thought once that turnover happened, I just thought from a combination of things is where the game went south.
On the flip side of things, I thought go ahead, Arthur.
Oh, no, I was saying complimentary football. When you get a short field from a defensive turnover, offensively, you want to push that in for 7. And on the flip side, man, defensively, If you can get off the field quicker and get that offense out there, then they're able to go out there and have longer drives and get their defense a little bit winded. So, no, I get it, man. You're absolutely right.
When you look at the flip side of things, I thought the first half for the offense was really as complete of a half as they've played all season. And you look at the stats from that first half, 20 points, 71% on third downs, over 200 yards of offense. Dale, what was working for them in that first half?
They were running the football and running it consistently with Najee Harris, getting straight downhill with him. He was averaging almost 6 yards a carry in the first half. Yes, that was obviously augmented by the 19-yard touchdown run. But I think they need to continue to do that. They tend to get away from it at times. It's like, okay, we get into a 2-minute situation, and then all of a sudden you forget that you were running the ball really effectively in the first half when you come back out in the second half. You don't have to recreate the wheel there. Just continue to pound the football until they figure out a way to stop it, or they make you not run the football. And the Bengals weren't doing that. The Steelers were very effective running the football. And if you get 5 yards on first down, you are allowed to run the ball again on second down to try to pick up that first down. I just think that they need to get that running game going and stick with the running game. That will make things so much easier for Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I do agree. Making the running game or having it more consistent, yeah. But at the same time, I do feel like that Bengals defensive line was a lot better in the second half, especially as the game went on. And I just think that we're seeing this battle of the minds in the sense of, all right, the Bengals scored. Do you continue to try to get this running attack going and make it consistent, or do you feel like you got to score to keep up? And I just feel like at times we kind of battle with that Matt Canada, Kenny Pickett in this offense, and it looks as if we won't always consistently have an identity in some of these second halves or in some of these more challenging situations. And that was kind of my perspective or my takeaway looking at the offense in the second half versus that first half as pertains to rush and attack.
Now, obviously, we're not taking moral victories here. The second half was frustrating. But when you look at that first half, Merril, do you see signs of progress with this offense? And is that a step in the right direction based on what we saw in those first 2 quarters?
Well, I thought the Saint game was a much better game where you saw signs and hope. And that all starts with the offensive line, and how well they played. They played fast. They were efficient. Now, one thing the Bengals did do differently than the Saints is they just didn't stand there. They didn't line up in the front and say, come block us. They did a great job when the Steelers do some type of jet motion or motion. They shifted to that. They adjusted to it. They ran linebackers through, and that is harder from an offensive perspective to handle those type of things. They didn't handle it very well. They didn't account for people. I heard last week they felt like they had figured that out, that double team working together, and they probably did if people just stand there, But when people move around and run and shift and stunt, they're struggling with that. They still struggled with that, especially in the second half. They struggled with that. And there was no explosive plays in the second half where you had some a majority of them in the first half. And then when they had an explosive play, they complemented that explosive play because the one explosive play, by Pickens, to put him in a position of fifth in the field and being able to have a clean set of downs on the Bengal 49-yard line. They went backwards. They did nothing from that perspective, especially after they got a big run off that big play. So I actually thought it was more of a backpedal, to be honest with you. The first half was a compliment to maybe what they did against the Saints, but then they digressed in the second half and played some of their worst football. And had a lot of bad penalties that, you hold, and then you have botched plays and you have missed assignments. At this point in the season, those are hard to swallow because you got to be better than that from a professional aspect, be more prepared, and quit doing those self-inflicting things that are hurting you on drives and costing you games.
Arthur, for you, what did you take away from that first half offense that this team can use to springboard forward for the rest of the season?
Well, number one, that they are capable of being explosive. We saw a couple of plays where they were actually stretching the field. We obviously had the miscue with Kenny Pickett and George Pickens in the end zone, but that was still an aggressive call. That was still a schemed up call where you saw a guy running wide open. So seeing those type of plays, seeing the Najee Harris run in the first half, the way the offensive line blocked, it shows me once again that this team is capable, because that is part of the discussion, right? Is it personnel? Is it coaching? Are they good enough? Well, when they're showing some of these things on tape, we can see where they are. But the bigger thing is the consistency. How do we get them to not just do it in the first half, but do it in the second half? Not just do it when guys are static, but when the defense makes an adjustment. And I think that that's one of the things that we are still trying to figure out offensively when teams make adjustments, how fast we can make an adjustment off of that. But I still can see the positive. I still can see the progression. They just have to continue it. And ultimately, we know with progression, it's not always going to be linear. So there are going to be some times where we feel really good, really optimistic about this team, about this offense specifically, like the first half. But then you see the second half and it's like, all right, this team, they have to get it back together, man. They got to go back to the drawing board. And that is a part of progress. It's not always going to be smooth, but it's a part of it.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, both obviously played the game. What is the one thing the one reason why coaches are loath to play young players? They just aren't consistent enough. They don't have that consistency.
Absolutely.
That whole offense is a bunch of young players other than a couple of guys, and so you're seeing some of that inconsistency.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
All right, guys, plenty still to talk about on the other side of the football. We're talking defense when we come back from break.
We pinned them back, and they went plus 90 and scored a touchdown on the subsequent drive, and I just thought that was a significant sequence in the game. And we got to make people settle for field goals. We can't allow people to score touchdowns at the rate they scored tonight. You got to make them settle for field goals. We weren't able to do that, and that's why the game ended up the way it ended up.
Welcome back to the Extra Point presented by Microsoft Surface. You hear Mike Tomlin talking there about the defensive struggles with this team. Generally, though, they held the ground game in check from the Bengals. They won the turnover battle. Dale, how did this team give up 37 points then? Again,
too many missed tackles in the secondary or by the linebackers. And I saw a quote from Zach Taylor that I thought was really interesting after the game. T. Higgins was not targeted in the first quarter of this game at all. And Zach Taylor was asked about that, and he said, well, T came to me and said that, gave me some plays that he thought he could get open on based on what he was seeing from the Steelers defense. And then they did those things. You're allowed to do that during a game, and so they got some matchups that were beneficial to them. There's no doubt about it. T. Higgins was obviously without Jamar Chase out there, the number one target in that offense. And when you know that, you do go into a game trying to minimize that. Well, obviously they saw some things there. You'd like to see the Steelers do some of that with Deontay Johnson on the other side of the ball, figure out some ways to get their best guy in space and let him get some run after the catch. So, 13 targets for T. Higgins after the first quarter. He caught 9 of them. Again, those 3 balls that were thrown behind the line of scrimmage that all turned into touchdowns. Those things can't happen.
Yeah, and when you're talking about T. Higgins, this goes back to some of the familiarity with them being in the division. One of the big staples with Steelers on defense is they don't travel their cornerbacks. They play right and left. So you're always going to be able to create some type of mismatch with the slot receiver, the down safety, or the linebacker. And that's been one of the big criticisms of the Steelers defense historically. But every defense is going to have strengths and weaknesses, pros and cons to it. So them isolating that slot matchup, that's why you were getting T. Higgins on an Arthur Maulet or on a Terrell Edmonds. And it was good by them. My critique for Terrell Austin is if you're not going to have your corners travel to offset them clearly attacking that, what else are you going to do to offset that? Do you go to a double team approach? Do you have the safety bring eyes over there? Or do you blitz it? But whatever it is, you have to figure out another answer to that, because just because we know that this is the Steeler way in terms of playing their corners left and right, when you're getting them putting their number one receiver, because there was no Jamar Chase, in the slot every single time, that's where you have to say to yourself, hey man, we have to make some type of adjustment. I just don't feel like we did fast enough. And that was why T was able to go for 9 catches, 148 yards without having a target in the first quarter.
Yeah, you guys talk about chunk plays, the yards after the catch. That really plagued the Steelers defense in the second half. Merrill, what changes could they have made in that second half and moving forward to stop those chunk plays from happening?
Well, let's go back to, what Arthur was talking about, trying to create. The NFL's about matchup. I don't care who we're talking about. It's not just the Steelers. Every team in the National Football League is trying to create mismatches. So if you can get a guy like Arthur was saying, somebody in the slot, you don't think he's a favorable matchup, so a safety in this case when they're backed up, you like the matchup. Well, that might be true, but then you cannot cater to that by playing poorly fundamentally. So I'll give you an example. So if I played in the slot, I played out of the backfield. Where we ultimately want to win is in the middle of the field, okay? Arthur would know this, that as a linebacker, you never want to get beat in the middle of the field. You want to funnel people to the outside. Well, in the big play that got them going on that first play, where they throw the football right in the middle of the field. And what happened? Edmonds just opened up his hips and let him go. So he didn't even give it, the access was there, to disrupt that and try to make him go over the top and make it much more complicated from a fundamental aspect. And being able to defend that is where you start. They get the matchup. Okay, well, let's not surrender to that. Don't make it easy on them. Don't snap the ball and then open up and let you run across the field. And I got to trail you. The chances of you catching the ball is going to be very significant, which it was. And then when we get guys in a position to make tackles, you got to finish those tackles. So, at the end of the day, everybody's going to create mismatches. How can you play that fundamentally better? So that going forward, you got to learn from those things. You can't give access to the middle. You can't make it easy on them because they're going to create that. There's no way a team is going to play on Sunday and not give up a mismatch. It's going to happen. Just can you win those mismatches, and can you do a better job fundamentally in defending them when they do have the advantage?
We saw what the Steelers did to Joe Burrow the last time these two teams met. The pressure was a little bit less this time around. Dale, did this Bengals offensive line just improve a lot, or were the Steelers doing something differently that created a little bit less pressure on Joe Burrow this time around?
I thought Lael Collins, their right tackle, improved dramatically from the opener. He did a nice job on TJ Watt, keeping him in check. I didn't see there were some doubles on Watt, and he's always going to have to run the gauntlet at times. But if that's the case, other guys have to win too, and you got to win those situations. And they did a nice job stopping the run, and they did situationally had some pressure. But I thought there were a couple of times where they had Burrow in the pocket, they hit him, and he was still able to either escape and get rid of the football and make a play, or at least get rid of the football. And those hurt. I mean, those are plays where you could have them backed up, a 6 or 7 yard loss. And he turns that into just a loss down. That's huge, especially against an explosive team like that one.
Yeah, and to piggyback on it, even when times where we were going to try to pressure them or speed up the clock for Joe Burrow, he's seeing his receiver win at the line of scrimmage. Kind of similar to what Merril was talking about. A guy opens up the gate, loses to his leverage point right away. That's an easy throw and catch. It's an easier read. When you're pressed up in the slot and you're not getting a good jam, fundamentals. Now this guy's stacking you, he's on top of you. It's an easier throw and catch for Joe Burrow. So it was a lot of that as well. Not just their offensive line being better, but I thought that those things, and there were some times where they would make sure to keep guys in the C-gap area. Samaje Perine would make sure he's taking a little bit slower of a release to just influence that DN. You would see Hayden Hurst at times two hands intentionally just touching TJ because it's a residual thing. And as a pass rusher, that adds up. You start messing with your alignment. You start trying to figure out, hey, who's chipping me instead of focusing on what rush I want to use. And that was a good job by the Bengals offensively. And those are some of the same critiques that when we're talking about our offense and we're looking at some of the pressure that we allowed, we're saying, hey, well, can we do some of those type of things to help our offensive line out also? But I thought that Cincinnati did a good job of doing that, and that did minimize some of that pressure that we're accustomed to getting from our defense.
Merril, how about you?
Well, Shelby, you know what? There's a formation-wise, this is what I love about the NFL. It's so strategically challenging, to what Arthur was mentioning. I think Dell alluded to it as well. Highsmith and Watt are never going to be ignored on critical downs. And what they did is they didn't necessarily get two people on them, but they did is they widened the formation. So if you got your tackle there, they put a tight end and flank him out and make TJ Watt move another 3 yards out. Once you do that, he's got to run through that traffic. That's like doubling. You put it back to his side. So they did a good job from that perspective based on what you saw week one. As a group, they've gotten better. So schematically, they did a better job in trying to neutralize him and Highsmith. And the Steelers tried to do some things to counter that. If you notice, they were up in the A gap a lot. So they were trying to pull and squeeze the offensive line down and shorten the corners. So that chess match was going on. I just credit the Bengals for, strategically doing a better job on the perimeter and just not letting those two guys wreck the game, especially TJ Watt. And and they can do all that, and guess what almost happens? TJ Watt almost wrecks the game. Had the offense complemented it, TJ Watt would have wrecked it at the end of the day. And he wrecks it from playing inside, which just tells you just the luxury the Steelers have by having a guy like that and how dangerous he is. You can focus on him, occupying, you think you have him, and he's still going to do something to probably create a nightmare for you. And once he did that turnover, that's why I go back to that turnover. Really, after he did that, from a momentum aspect, nothing was complemented. Like to Arthur's point about complementary football and doing your part. The offense failed in aside from an explosive play from Pickens, it was the only thing that they had after that, and only 3 points. And that's just not enough offensively to complement those type of turnovers and big plays your defense did give you.
All right, gentlemen, well, that's going to do it for us here on the Extra Point presented by Microsoft Service. Join us on Wednesday for the matchup show as we preview the Monday night game between the Steelers and Indianapolis Colts. For Merril Hoge, Dale Lolley, and Arthur Moats, I'm Shelby Cassesse. Have a great evening.